All right. So, a little bit about me. I have my own business that's a transformational life coaching business. I always kind of operate in the mentality that I'm not this or that, I'm this and that. So I kind of dabble in a lot of different things. One of the things on the transformational life coaching space is time management. The clients that I work through in time management, time optimization, but as well as, I told her I wouldn't move and I'm
Yeah.
sorry. As well as what I call like heart healing. I have a big heart for helping people in a healing modality that I call heart healing, but really it's soul healing. It's helping people when they have reoccurring patterns and cycles. They've often tried a lot of different things, haven't been able to get like resolution, and really it's just bringing in compassion, helping them sort of resolve what's going on internally and just having compassion. I grew up without compassion and empathy, so I had to kind of learn what that is and what that means, and so it's a big part of just the healing that I like to bring in. But today's focus is on time optimization, which I'm super excited about, because the other thing about me is, this isn't to like hype up or give kudos, but I often have people say like, how do you do all of the things that you do? So I am an internal auditor at a bank. I do the life coaching business on the side. I also am admin for Dare to Believe Ministries, and then I also do some admin type stuff for another client and then another client as well. So I have a lot of things, and if I don't have more structure and you add more things, then the blessings can feel like a burden. So structure is key, otherwise when you add more, then you become stressed, and that's why we're here. That's why we want to talk about optimizing our time so that we can do more with our time and feel productive. And really the biggest thing is value alignment, because that's where fulfillment comes in. So first and foremost, I applaud you for being here, because obviously you decided to show up. You kind of went in on you. You're investing in you to be here and to learn. And so I want to applaud you for that. My coach and mentor says this: one of the most important investments you can make is the investment you make in yourself. And that's really what you're doing by being here. You're investing in yourselves in a whole different category, in a different way. So we want to optimize our time, as Ephesians 5:15 and 16 tells us. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. So you all have little packets, and I'm going to go over information within your packets. Also, there's a misspelling, which I realized after I handed them out, which is always super fun. But hey, that's why we're here, right? We're not perfect people, and nothing turns out the way we always planned, so that's okay. But the first thing I want to start with is a self-awareness. So we're going to kind of be engaging. I'm going to have you guys do some different activities to kind of help align your ideal week, define your ideal week, and your values. So we're going to have fun today. But we're going to dive into self-awareness a little bit, because Proverbs chapter 20 verse 5 states, the purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. So self-awareness really is about getting insight about ourselves from God, and then drawing it out. So we're going on a journey with God to discover who He has created us to be. And so within self-awareness, we're going to talk about abilities and values. So there's 3 types of abilities, and of course God has had His hand in all of this. As Jeremiah 1:5 says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. So God knew to whom we would be born, which defined our talent and our natural abilities. He has guided us in our lives, which encouraged our acquired skill, and then He's given us His gifts, which are the spiritual gifts. So I'm going to break those down really quickly. Obviously, you guys are familiar with a lot of these, but real quick, what is your unique gifts? So God has wired us, of course, to match the work that He has called us to. So gaining an understanding of our wiring can help to ensure we're living our life based on who we are rather than who we think we are. And a great tool in this area can be a spiritual gifts assessment. Obviously there's a lot of opinions and feelings about that, but sometimes it's nice to have a tool of some place to start. Like, what has God given me? Help me understand my wiring. And then we get to go on a discovery of who God has created us to be. And oftentimes then this connects with our talent and natural abilities. So what is your unique ability? Everyone has a degree of untapped genius, an uncommon IQ in some area, and often these are more prevalent when we're younger because we're more connected to our true selves, and of course the world hasn't come and shut some of those gifts down. But Ephesians 2:10 states, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus, to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." So our talent, our natural ability, is God-given, not only because it's His good pleasure to give it to us, but because it's given specifically for what we're called to do.
Right.
And so this is important to recognize and take note of, and this unique ability often drives our desire to acquire further skills. You think of someone who's a painter, they often want to learn to do different types of painting or different types of crafting, right? Like these things, these innate things that God has given us, it helps us kind of drives our hearts to turn towards some of these things, to do things in that area, and that's where we spend our time. So it helps us see where our values are too. So what is your unique appetite? When we talk about acquired skill, we all have a hunger in a certain area. So what are you uniquely interested in? What do you have a unique hunger for? What do you have a unique passion for? What drives you? And this is about discovering what we uniquely like, and these are the things we enjoy studying, learning, and acquiring skill in. So why is all of that important? Again, this often drives where we spend our time and what we tie value to. So bringing awareness to these things help us to understand our values and what we find important. So I know you guys have a number of sheets here. And again, the one that says ideal week, this first one is supposed to say Monday. It doesn't say that, but it's supposed to. But on this page that says ideal week, this column right here, I just want you to write down, I know it's kind of small, but just write down what are some of your spiritual gifts? What are some of your unique talents or abilities? What are some of your acquired skills that you've obtained over the course of time? So I'll just give you a few minutes to write that down, and if you guys need pens, let me know. I know that wasn't a ton of time, but again, it's not exhaustive. We know that there are lots of gifts, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but let's talk about time and values. So if our days were numbers, how would we treat them? And when we really think about it, our days actually are numbers, because our days are time, and time is currency. That's why we say I'm spending time, or I'm paying attention. So who or what are we paying with our time and our attention? Time is a valuable, non-renewable asset, and by non-renewable, it means once it's gone, it's gone. Therefore, we want to optimize that time. We want to make the most of the time. And now we can't manage it from the standpoint of doing more to get more hours, right? We all have 24 hours in a day. There's nothing more we can do to add to those 24 hours. But we can manage what we do within that time block. So we've got to invest our time in a way that lines up with our values. So then it brings up the question, what are your values? You can see each of you should have a piece of paper that looks like this. What I want you to do is on this left-hand side, just write out the things that are your values, the things that are most important to you. So maybe it's God, it's family, it's maybe you like to craft, maybe that's a high value. The things that you find important, I want you to write that down in this left-hand side here. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. What I want you to do with everything that you listed out, I want you to number it, with number 1 being the most important on down. And I know this gets tricky because a lot of people go, well, wait a minute, I have multiple number 1s. But if both those things were presented to you, which one's going to win out? Because one of them you're going to have time for, the other one you're not. One of them is going to take kind of the higher priority over the other one. So we'll just have you list them out. Again, starting with number 1 being the most important on down. So now you can set that one aside for now. Because we've gone through some self-awareness as it relates to abilities and values. Now we're going to gain some insight as we look at your typical week. So, on this piece of paper that says typical week, this has Monday through Sunday listed. I just want you to write out what your typical week looks like. So minus any surprises, interruptions, the things that go awry. What does your typical week look like Monday through Sunday? You don't have to write down every single thing, but just kind of write down what your typical week looks like. And it's the one title of typical week here. Sometimes when you write it down, you're like, ooh.
See, that wasn't on my value page. That
Well, yes, that's the next step actually. So do you know you can organize your day with things that actually don't matter? The key is making sure that the things that matter most to us aren't getting released from us. And that's why value alignment is so important. Fulfillment only comes when there's value alignment. So, is our life actually aligned with what we said our values are? And so when you go back to this document here, on the left-hand side, I want you right at the top where it says title, perceived values. So underneath this title option, I just want you to write perceived values. And that's on the left-hand side where you wrote down all your values here, okay? And then I want you to take a few minutes and look at all of the values that you wrote down on this side and compare that to your typical week. Are the things that you said are your values? Does your week contain the things that you say are your values? Are they getting the most time from you? Or are they getting the least amount of time? Again, if there is value alignment. Oh, I feel like that's awesome. How many for you do you feel like this was a little eye-opening? I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is time thieves, okay? If we find ourselves with a discrepancy between the things we said was most important or the time that we're spending on it, or we simply find ourselves running out of time, chances are something may be stealing it. Now, we might know what it is, and it might not be something that's even remotely in our control, like little kids or something like that, right? We don't really have a choice in those matters. But if we don't know what it is, we want to find it, okay? So where is our time going? Luke 12:39 states, "But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into." So we're looking at what is stealing our time. We're trying to be aware of what is taking more time than we really want it to take. We want to be aware of the thieves of our time so that if it's in our control, we can actually have a plan for it not to be stolen. So if we make an investment by choosing to sow our time into something, maybe it's reading, listening, watching, or doing something, we don't want to waste that investment. We want to reap a harvest from all of our investments, including where we're spending our time. So are you reaping a harvest from the things that you're choosing to invest your time into? So what I'd like you to do on your typical week, you should have an open space on the far side. And I just want you to take a few minutes and write down anything that you recognize as time thieves. And then anything that you recognize as time thieves that in your control versus out of your control. Because let's be frank, there are time thieves that are just completely out of your control. There's no changing it. It just is what it is. But this is just bringing self-awareness to it. So again, if we are aware of where those thieves are, we can make a plan for it. Social media, Netflix, some common ones that go into that column. So the next part then, on this piece of paper, where you had your perceived values on the left-hand side, I want you to write on the title, actual values here. And now you can look at the things on this left-hand side when you compared it to your typical week, if there was any gaps or anything like that. Is there anything that needs to be changed in relation to your actual values? So a lot of times what we'll have is we'll have a perceived value, something that we think is important, and then when we look at our typical week, it's not involved in our typical week at all, in which case then we either need to change the rank or it actually isn't a value. And so this is an opportunity to say, okay, where are those gaps? And what is my actual value here? Do I need to reorder things? Do I need to take things off? Do I need to add things to my values? What is my actual values? I'll tell you when I did this for myself. So I had a season where I was like heavily working out. I was going to the gym all the time, okay? But then my seasons shifted and I didn't actually go back to my actual values. Well, I had a perceived value for working out being really high. So when I did this, I was like, oh yeah, working out's like a 4, da-da-da-da-da, went around. And then I was like, wait, I'm not working out at all. Like not even a little bit. So I wasn't working out at all, so it was a perceived value from an old season. It was a high importance, but it was a high importance at a different season. and I'm now in a different season than I was back then when it wasn't 4. So I had to reorganize things so that it actually aligned with my life, in which case then I wasn't feeling guilty because my perceived value wasn't an actual value. So now I can actually align my values with the way I'm living my life and see it kind of fulfilled. That's where the value alignment and fulfillment comes into play, because it's actually aligned with how I'm living my life and what I actually believe it to be. It's an actual value. Has a correct number assigned to it. Correct order. Actual values. But if you need to reorder it or you need to put different numbers on it, you can do that underneath your actual values. Taking a look at our time thieves, really the goal in all of this is to lay out a plan for an ideal week, okay? Because we now know what our true values are. We've got our actual values, not just our perceived. And now what we want to do is we want to outline our ideal week, avoiding our time thieves as much as possible. Habakkuk 2:2 states, write the vision, make it plain, that he may run who reads it. So we want to be able to run the race that the Lord has called us to, and the best way to do it is to make it plain. We want to set a schedule or set our ideal week so that we're aligned with our values. And you don't have to write down every single thing you do every single day, of course, but we do want to outline the most important things because we don't want to go a whole week and not have our activity be aligned with our values. And so with this ideal week where you listed your abilities, your natural talent, all that good stuff on the far right, I want you to go ahead and outline your ideal week. Now that you know your values, you want to be mindful of those time cues so that it doesn't eat up your week. Making sure that you're realigning your day so that your activities align with your values. Help to kind of see what your values are and what your weeks are like. So the final step to this process really that I want to talk about is just reassessing. So reassessing our abilities, reassessing our ideal week. It's an important part of the process because, you know, using my example of being in the different seasons with working out, if I didn't take a look at my values, my perceived value would have been, yeah, working out's a 4. And no, my life was not looking like that at all. So we're going from glory to glory, of course. We're constantly being morphed and changed in the image and likeness of Christ. And so in that process, we want to ensure we're reassessing where we're at in that journey and aligning our days up with where the Lord has us in this season. So when it comes to reassessing our abilities, remember when I say abilities, that's spiritual gifts, talent, or natural abilities, and acquired skill. There are seasons in our life that require certain abilities. We can have a skill at one level in one season that's no longer adequate for another season. And so that may change, you know, what we put value on if we're going to acquire additional skill in this season. That might change our order of values. Maybe learning is going to be brought up higher because we're in a different season and we need to acquire more skill in a certain area in this next season. There also, of course, might be seasons where the Holy Spirit distributed something new and maybe we're not aware of. So really it's possible for our dominant gifts to shift, to adapt, to change for what season we're in, what we need. The Lord knows, but that's why it's important that we're aligned. We're asking the Lord, we're in connection with Him and what He's released to us and how He wants us to use those gifts He's given us. And then we also want to reassess our values. While they can change order, they tend not to really change a ton because if it's a core value, it's going to remain true to who we are. So has the order of our values shifted, kind of like we did today? We need to reassess where our numbers are and what's deemed as most important. And then finally, we need to reassess our ideal week. Of course, our ideal week never goes ideally, right? There's always stuff that pops up. There's always things that happen. But we're looking for progression over perfection. So it's our vision for how we can optimize our week. And no matter what, our ideal week will work basically until it doesn't. And so if it doesn't, we just want to go back through it and see what isn't working for us, what maybe has shifted and we just haven't been aware of it. We marry the mission, we date the method, okay? So the method is the ideal week. The mission is purpose in our productivity. We want to be productive with our week. We want to have that production be purposeful so that it's aligned with what we deem as our values. And we want it to be optimized. Again, we don't want to go a whole week without having our activity be aligned with our values, what we deem as important. So I know I kind of talked about this at the beginning, but basically order in our life allows blessings to actually feel like blessings. Because whenever we get more responsibility and we don't have more structure, the result of that is always going to be stress. Of course, we choose the people that we allow to lead us, and they have a responsibility to shepherd us well, to lead us well. But the majority of the responsibility is on us, because it's about us responding to our calling, managing what we do with our time, so that we can be aligned with the mission that God has placed in us to be done through us. So that is really all I have for you guys on time optimization. When I do this with clients, we talk about a couple of other things like energy zones. You know, are you a morning person, an afternoon person? Does it take you a while to wake up in the morning? Are you groggy in the morning? That sort of thing, because that can play a role too as to what your typical week looks like. And then also we walk through what I call a life mission statement, because what you'll find is in your activity, there's always like one word that sums up everything that you do. And that one word is kind of like the outline of your life. And that kind of helps in decision making. When you have a life mission statement, when you get presented with something, does this align with what I'm called and created to do, what I'm called and created to do? So those are some other things that I usually tie into this, but I want to honor the time. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Did you guys find this helpful at all? Awesome. I did this actually with our Emerge Transformation School students last year, not this year, but last year. And they all felt it was really helpful too, because they're signing up for school, they have a ton of homework, they have books to read, and so it's being able to help them, of course, add on more, because again, you add more, you don't have more structure, you're going to end up in stress, so it's trying to help them do that, and something the Lord gave me as to how to help them. So anyway, thank you guys so much for your time.
Love it. Thank you.